Welcome to the Contrarians and tonight's topic. What is composition in songwriting and why is it important to you? We have a pretty big panel. We do want to hear from you in the chat. Let's check it out. Let's get started. Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight this is our topic. So this is kind of cool because I don't think we've ever talked about anything quite like this. But the question is, and we do want to hear from you in the chat, what is composition in songwriting and why is it important to you? So I'm assuming that when we talk about this, we're going to try to transpose this into like bands that we listen to and things like that. So we do want some examples. I'm sure the panel has some examples. So look at this panel that we have. Philip, we've got the janitor of rock, Alexander. We're just going to call him Alex tonight. But if you've seen that name, the janitor of rock, that's him. And this is his Virgin episode. So let's all be gentle. Got Jamie Laszlo on here and Steve Polari. So gentlemen, nice to see you tonight. You ready to talk some composition?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. We might just, as you said earlier, keep it loose.
We're going to keep it loose.
Yeah.
All right, cool. But Philip, I'm going to start out with you because you were here first.
Right.
Unless someone else wants to start. Did anybody else want to start? Steve Polari, I don't think he wants to start this dog.
I'll go first.
Go ahead, Philip.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Right. So when I heard this topic, which I think is a great topic, it's really open to interpretation, and everyone can kind of give different perspectives and examples. And I think maybe I can learn a lot from all these guys, from all of you here today. So I kind of thought about this in terms of categories. So when I started thinking about composition, what I like in certain composers and bands, but also myself, since I play music and I've been in bands, how do I go about sometimes composing? How do I compose with others? What kind of style what kind of style do I gravitate towards, and what kind of structures do I follow in terms of songwriting? So my first category would be riff-based. Now, let's be more specific. Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton have been credited often as being some of the forefathers in rock and roll music of the riff. Hendrix with Voodoo Child, Purple Haze, and Clapton as well. At least with Cream, for instance, like you have songs that open and start. Then they start building on a riff. But I was thinking more about composition in this category where everything is based on riffs. So not just chords or power chords or seventh chords or whatever, but more specifically songs and generally composing on riffs. So the first thing that, of course, came to my mind had to be Black Sabbath, and especially Paranoid. I was thinking of like Iron Man, for instance, which is just one riff after another riff after another riff. So basically composing on riffs where your lyrics are sung according to the melody and even the rhythm of the riff. Think of Iron Man, right? As he lost his mind, right? The whole thing is like following the riff. The drums are following the rhythm that is given from that initial riff. And then you get more and more and more riffs. And everything seems to be just growing and expanding based on riffs, not on chord changes, not on any kind of strange or intricate progression, but on riffs. And that's something that I personally also gravitate towards when I write in a band, when we are sort of composing some tunes together. And yeah, I really like that kind of approach. And I wanted to also, apart from Black Sabbath as the more obvious choice of playing constantly on one riff and another, to the point where it becomes almost like progressive. You have so many changes from one riff to another, even if all those riffs are based on one scale, like for example, the A minor pentatonic, right? That's what Tony Iommi would do, right? Of course, down tuning, at least what's the word I'm looking for? Well, anyway, down tuning quite a bit and playing on the more like, thick part of the strings. But yeah, there are so many changes with so many riffs where like it becomes almost progressive. But just to finish on this category so that the other guys can continue, I wanted to give an example of this band here I really like very much, Down. I think that this is the best example of a more contemporary band that has learned from Black Sabbath. Pepper Keenan, who plays here guitar, who is also in Corrosion of Conformity. I think he is one of maybe the best disciple of Tony Iommi in composing on riffs. Opening with a riff and then writing words on those riffs and introducing more and more riffs and just, bouncing on and off on riffs. So that's at least where I start off. I don't know what does the rest of the panel think of that, and what are your choices?
I actually had a pretty similar approach, and writing on riffs, and I also was going to talk about Iron Man.
Oh, sweet. Okay, wow.
Yeah,
all right.
because I mean, I really like Black Sabbath, but Iron Man is really a song I don't like that much, because I don't like. I mean, I also played in band, but as a singer, not so much as a guitarist. And I don't like when the singer follows the riff. I think it's kind of lazy songwriting. I know it's also about celebrating the riff, but in Iron Man, I always hated it how Ozzy is mimicking the riff. I always thought this is so stupid. I never liked the song except for the solo part, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, and Ozzy got later on, he got a lot of better in his approach to singing and what he's gonna do over a riff, because I mean, composing a good melody over a riff, a singing melody, is not that easy, because you don't want to interfere with the riff. And he got a lot of better, and there are many examples where he managed to find a good melody to sing over a riff. Yeah, but I always had a problem with that.
Yeah,
yes,
they became much more sophisticated down the road, and for sure.
I mean, if you're a guitar player and also a singer, I kind of can relate to it. If you don't want to make the singing too complicated, but if you're only the singer, you should be a bit more creative. But I mean, this
probably set the internet on fire with Ozzy and Black Sabbath.
Maybe.
I'll put Alex's email down below so you can email him directly.
No, please not. No, I mean, I'm not the biggest Ozzy fan, to be honest, but I really love Black Sabbath, and of course it's Ozzy, and he has a big legacy. I understand. Yeah, but I always had some problems with him. So
I'm just giving you crap because you're new. Come on, it's like a hazing, Alex.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not a big fan of when the singer does the same exact thing as the guitar riff either. I think sometimes it can come off as jarring, and a little annoying at times. If they do it for a minute, 30 seconds or so, it's all right. But I get where you're coming from.
I like a riff I think of Fugazi's Waiting Room. It's got that cool opening riff, but the vocals don't follow it. And then I like within a riff song too, I like a really catchy chorus. And that's what I like about that tune. I think the chorus just drags you in. Maybe Iron Man really doesn't have a chorus. I like the song, but to me, there's not a chorus that really just pulls me in on that. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the riff. Yeah.
On the other hand, I gave the example of Iron Man, but I don't know, when I think of a tune, let's say again on Paranoid, like Electric Funeral, which is one of my favorite deep cuts of Black Sabbath, you have this kind of descending chromatic riff after the intro, and it's very doomy, very ominous, plodding, and when Ozzy sings over that with that same kind of melody and that kind of plodding rhythm, it really adds to that doomy, gloomy atmosphere. And I really love that about early Black Sabbath, even if I prefer them later when they became definitely more sophisticated with Sabotage, Volume 4. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, cool. Anybody else want to jump in on this?
I mean, I had a different starting point than the riff. I mean, the riff is a great place to start because a lot of the songs we love, I'm sure, did start with the riff and then they build on top of that. But my starting point was, well, I was thinking of all the different types of songs that are written and all the different styles. And I thought it was a good starting point to go right at the beginning with my favorite song of all time, which is Southern Cross by Crosby, Stills and Nash. I think it's a perfectly written song from Daylight Again. Sometimes I see songs as a structure, and it can be like a perfect house, well-structured, put-together house like Southern Cross. You got your verse, chorus, verse, bridge, guitar solo. You got all the parts in place, and it works. Now, you can get more simple than Southern Cross. You can go all the way down to Happy Birthday, which is about the most simple song ever. And then you can go from there to some avant-garde crazy shit. So I was trying to think of all that, going into different directions. And I was thinking some songs can be a house. Other songs, as they get a little bit crazier, can be like a blob of water on a plexiglass. And as you move it, it's just going left, right. And that's when you start going into avant-garde. You don't know where the song's going to go next. But that type of music, for me, if you're going to write a song like that, has to have a central feel or a central idea still within the craziness. And that's what the plexiglass is. It can't go off. It can move around and go crazy places, but it can't fall over the edge. So you get a song like Southern Cross, but then you get the craziness on the glass and you start getting into like Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. Crazy, but it still has a central idea and thought. Or Universe Zero Heresy, which is pretty avant-garde prog. It goes all different directions, but it has a Universe Zero feel to it. So there's my point on that. I thought I had other examples here. I tell you what turns me off with prog and avant-garde type stuff is when they cheat sometimes. And I feel like sometimes they wrote 4 separate songs and then they just paste them together and say, that's our epic. That's our 16, 20-minute epic. Those are separate ideas that you duct tape together, and you're not a musical genius for doing it. It's just, I feel like it's cheating. Like Newer Yes sounds like that sometimes to me. I'll tell you what, the new Steven Wilson, even though it has different parts, they're 20-minute tracks. And I know you can get a version of it with each track as a different track on your CD. But I wish it was like that on everything because there are different songs within those 20-minute tracks.
Yeah, that's true. It's a really good
it doesn't need to be 20 minutes, Steven. There are parts that I like more than others. I wish I could just play that 4.5 minutes. So that can be a turnoff. I will say, I think the best songs that an artist is most proud of is written within a few minutes. It's like they always existed. The song always existed. They were just the one who found it and pulled it out of the air. Or you can say the muse pulled it out of the air for them. The muse can make something flow out of you. Like ever see the movie where the woman's doing a seance and she's possessed by the spirit and she's just the vessel for the spirit. And then she speaks to like the loved ones as the person who died. That's what a songwriter can be sometimes. Just the vessel for it to come out of the air, go into your brain, through you, and out your fingers. That's how it feels. I've written some things, and sometimes that's how it felt for me.
Well, it's like the whole early Bob Dylan catalog. You ever see that the interview on 60 Minutes? And he said, was it Ed Bradley said, who wrote these songs? And
Right.
Dylan would go, I really have no idea where they came from. They just flowed out through me.
Yes,
and he
that's the best songs.
And
ever.
he said, basically, that guy's gone. I can't do that anymore.
Right.
He said, I can't explain it, but they just flew out of me. And you're 100% right, Jamie.
And I think you can tell because when you overthink something and you're overthinking a song, to the listener, it starts to sound forced. And I'll give you an example. This is the other example I might have had here. Dio. Let's talk language that a lot of people understand. Ronnie James Dio.
Okay.
You take Holy Diver. Holy Diver sounds like a song that wrote itself. A lot of the songs on this album sounds like they were written pretty quick and they wrote themselves. You go into Angry Machines and Magica, and the songs start to sound clunky because I think he's overthinking things. Magica is a good idea. He came up with this big, long story, a decent idea, but the songs around the idea are very forced. And that's why these aren't the classics that his early albums are. So, I mean, and I'll tell you another thing you can have a good song, you can still screw it up.
Yeah.
I was trying to think, I'm not a big hair metal guy because I've learned over the last few years that attitude and execution means a lot more to me than I ever thought it did. And the attitude, a lot of hair metal bands, even though they might have a decent song, sometimes they screw it up in execution. And I was trying to think of a song that I don't like by one of those bands that would be maybe good in someone else's hands. And I came up with the reverse. I thought of a really good song, Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin, brings a tear to my eye when he sings it. Put it in the hands of Ugly Kid Joe, and you have a freaking disaster. Same song, but a freaking disaster. So, yeah, I mean, but I tell you what, I always tell people songwriting is the first thing that I gravitate to first. Some people think musicianship, how heavy it is, blah, blah, blah. Songwriting. I'm always focused on a song, and that's why a good song is a good song. That's why I wore this, because of that. I can listen to Dua Lipa because these are great songs. I don't care that it's pop. It's great songs. I got the new Sabrina Carpenter. There's decent songs on here. Miley Cyrus. And then I could go right to Gojira because these guys write great, heavy songs. I could go to Gate Creeper. I can go deep into like doom funeral fuck and listen to this because they're writing great doom songs. So if you focus on the song, the more you focus on the song, I think the more genres you're open to listen to.
Okay, but can't you have like you can have a great song, but if the production isn't any good, can't that take away from a great song? I put that
in execution, in the category of execution, how you're presenting it. Yeah. Production can screw a song up too.
I would say, Jamie, sorry to interrupt, but I'm not a big Bruce Springsteen fan, but I really didn't like Dancing in the Dark because it's got that 80s sheen to it. But then I heard an acoustic version of it. It's like, oh man, this is actually a really good tune. The lyrics are good. They don't seem as, what's the word? Silly, because it's like production stripped down. And it's like, oh man, this is a good tune. And also about the inspiration, Keith Richards talks about Give Me Shelter came to him. It was a rainy day. Anita Pallenberg was in shooting Performance with Mick Jagger. He was paranoid, and that tune just came to him. It just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, so, I've got another example, Steve. If we're talking Bruce Springsteen, the song Tougher Than the Rest that's on Tunnel of Love, Everything But the Girl did a version of it that is absolutely breathtaking.
Look at Because the Night.
It's not anywhere near what the Springsteen version is from, what was that, 89, 88? But my God, Everything But the Girl version is just stunning.
Blinded by the Light.
Yeah. I was going to go.
Good point. Excellent.
My first tune I thought of, like to Jamie's point, songwriting, it's Rocket Man to me is a perfect tune. Like that intro, this brings you in, and it's that pre-chorus before the chorus. Like I think it's going to be a lot. That song, that part's always in my head. That just brings you in, and there's a certain sadness in that. I like tunes that have light and then they sadness, and that's what I think the Beatles are great at. When their tunes are happy, but within that, there's that little bit of like melancholy, which I find attractive in songwriting. The other thing I find, to Jamie's point about getting too, like with prog, I find it sometimes with songwriters, like Elvis Costello. I love his early work, but his later work to me, he's trying too hard to be like a Burt Bacharach, like with his songwriting structure. He's getting a little too cute. That can be a turnoff too. Instead of like, it doesn't seem as natural as it used to be, if that makes sense.
The brain gets soft and old, and it runs out of ideas.
Exactly. What was the quote that John Lennon said? He said, people used to talk about John Lennon's work, like 1965, they always thought Norwegian Wood, things like Off with Help and all that was like his peak. And I think the quote, he said, well, you're only 25 once.
Yeah.
You can never,
But you know what you said
your peak.
What you said before about the Beatles about the melancholy, Steve, it's interesting that this is like another category in terms of composition where the Beatles, especially amongst musicians, are known and celebrated because they used all these interesting chords. They would compose using 7 chords, 9 chords, add 9, add 13 chords, and they would have these interesting progressions that would, like Jamie said before, you could see the song, right? They would evoke emotions, and they were able to like kind of paint a picture of the lyrics through the music by creating these kind of textures with the chords. And then you see so many other interesting bands, like obviously Pink Floyd, are monumental on Dark Side of the Moon, because again, like on that record, they have all these interesting weird chords, open chords, and it creates such interesting layers and textures that you don't hear on an album that has mostly like riffs, right? I mean, the Beatles have a few riffs, Ticket to Ride is a well-known riff, but they are more about those chords, rather than just riffs, right? But I wanted to ask Jamie, like with all the stuff you said before, where would you put a funeral doom band, which I know you like for instance, Bell Witch, which are like droning, 1 beat per week?
Tell you, you have a second part of that question?
No, go ahead.
Are you going to go on? I'll tell you what I love about Bell Witch is it does sound like one central idea and one feel, even though they have an album that is one, what is it, like 85-minute song, Mirror Reaper. The next note they play, they know they keep you hanging on. It's almost like watching a cliffhanger TV show or soap opera.
Right.
They know you want to hear that next note. They know you know what that next note is going to be. And then they play it and you're like, yeah. And then they know the next note you want to hear. And then they play that. They're great notes and they're worth waiting for. And you got to wait for them.
Yeah. You have to wait. That's the thing. You have to be patient.
Yeah. You have to be a little patient and just go, boom, boom. And then they get going a little bit. Boom, 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 boom. And you're like, yeah, slow down, Steve I.
Slow down, Steve I. All right, cool. All right, well, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
I have one example of like song starts out happy with the chords and then the vocals come in. Cemetery Gates by the Smiths. It's one of my favorite tunes of all time. It's got that Johnny Marr is amazing, right? He's not a riff. Well, he is a riff guy, but he's not a soloist, but his chords are just incredible. And then say what you want about Morrissey, he can be over the top, but I think it's all done with a wink, if you will. And the guy from Pantera loves the Smiths, the lead singer. He's a big fan. But anyway, I just find that song the chords, if you listen to the chords, they're kind of chimey and they're happy, but the lyrics are kind of, again, there's that melancholy, bit of sadness, in it. And I really and it's over in 3 minutes. It's great.
So that Cemetery Gates by Pantera is a cover?
It's not a cover, but there's an interview with him where he talks about how much he loves the Smiths, and he goes, "Hello, Cemetery Gates." And
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great Smith song. I will give you that.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have anything?
I don't know. You have anything, Grant?
Yeah.
Well, I think that the way I look at it is kind of like what I said before. I think you can have a great composition, but if the production's not right, if the stars don't align, I think a great composition can be clouded by the production. I'm sure there's tons of great stuff from the 80s, but a lot of that stuff now I can't get through it because of the production. Now the Smiths, a good example. Timeless, because they never followed that trend of the 80s. You could listen to any of the Smith stuff and it could have been released yesterday because they avoided all that studio gimmickry, the whole gated drum thing, all that. So all those songs I think present a lot better, but there's probably a lot of great stuff from the 80s that I could listen to and just go, God, and I can't get past it. So I think with composition, it's very important. But
80s production doesn't bother me. It's kind of like going back in a time machine, and I appreciate it.
Depends. Okay, this is how I look at it.
Depends, of course, here and there.
Let's use the band Cheap Trick. I know you don't get into Cheap Trick, Jamie. You gave them a shot. But the stuff from the 70s, when I listen to that, that is what Cheap Trick sounds like. Now, when they tried to sue Epic and lost, Epic had them. And they basically dictated what they were going to do. Now, you can listen to Standing on the Edge. You can listen to Busted. You can listen to The Doctor. That doesn't sound like Cheap Trick. I'm sure there are great songs in there. There's a lot of good songs on those records, but I can't get through the production.
I love Tonight It's You.
Tonight It's You is an exception.
Okay.
But Little Sister. There was a comp that came out on Real Gone Records that's got the original Jack Douglas mix. What was it? Tony Platt that got a hold of everything on, because Jack Douglas was supposed to carry through and produce Standing on the Edge, but he was in litigation with Yoko. He got pulled away, and I think Tony Platt? God, it's one of those guys who I think it's horrible. Took it, and he took all of Bunny's drum parts. He put in fake drums. They put on all these synths. But if you listen to the original version of Little Sister that's on the Real Gone comp, it's the original Jack Douglas mix. Little Sister's a great Cheap Trick song. It's very standard Cheap Trick. It could be on Heaven Tonight, could be on Dream Police. It's very much like that. You listen to the Jack Douglas mix that's not all futzed with, and I'm going, yes. But then I listen to Standing on the Edge version, and I'm going, no.
Yeah, so it goes the other way with
it can go
Born Again by Sabbath. You can have bad production in that way too. There's those great songs on Born Again, but there's that shitty production value to it. Some people think it adds character. Some people want a remix of it.
Hey,
with Cheap Trick, when you look at, it's hard to look because you look at the greatness of the Tom Worm, Jack Douglas era, and then you look at this crappy shit that came in the 80s, the Tony Platt stuff, and I'm just going, Jesus. But they had no power. They couldn't, until they got rid of that Epic contract and did the Rant Ant stuff, Cheap Trick really didn't come back together until then. They, couldn't do anything. I mean, that's either blessing or a curse from a record company, depending how you look at it, but it was definitely a curse with Cheap Trick. But again, I think everything has to come together and make a perfect thing. Composition, production, arrangement. There's so many things that I think come together.
But I think also, though, a great song will sound good just on either piano or acoustic guitar, right? In the end, if it's a really good tune. Another point about production is, Tim, replacements. That with all that reverb, the new mix they put out a year ago, from the original without all the reverb on it, it sounds so much better, to your point.
Did anybody, I know Laszlo has this. Remember when Pearl Jam was never a big fan of 10 because they thought it was too slick, and they put out that CD and that album where they, I don't want to say dumbed it down, but didn't they remix it, Jamie? Do you have that?
Yeah.
What, I'm just curious. Do you think that that was an improvement over the original record, or what's your thoughts on that? The revision 10.
We're talking some days I call that my favorite debut album of all time. So I'm a pretty big fan. And we all know what happens when one of your favorite albums of all time gets a different tweak into it. We're like, that's not the one I grew up with. So does it sound bad? No. When it first came out, I jammed to it a few times. I'm like, this sounds actually pretty cool. But I put it's on the shelf, and I listen to the, I'll pull out the same one because it has a remastered version of the regular mix on it, but I'll always listen to that.
I guess it depends upon your gateway drug on this stuff. You grow up on the original version.
Yeah,
But
play
let's say-
both versions for someone right now new to it, and they might like the remix.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, if someone's coming in fresh.
But those are great songs, though, I believe. So
if I could just say here on the matter of production, since Steven Wilson was mentioned earlier. Now, Steven Wilson, as you may know, is an audiophile, right? And he has been doing all of these remixes of like classic prog albums, Yes, Genesis, King Crimson, whatever. And he talks a lot about listening, like all these occasions where they will play his the Harmony Codex or his new one in like these special rooms with Dolby Atmos or what's it called? This newer technology. I forget what it's called. But anyway, like you basically need to make a huge investment to get all of these really expensive hi-fi sound systems and
speakers in the ceiling.
Yeah, speakers in the ceiling, whatever. Like, and what I want to say is that obviously I cannot afford that. Most ordinary people cannot afford that, and maybe we don't have enough space for that. And I think that a good composition can be enjoyed and can bring you a smile, even if you just hear it on your phone, like in stereo. You know, I love Steven Wilson. I think that anything he does for me, I can hear it also on my phone. I have no problem with that. So that's one thing I want to say about sound and production. And that it's a bit annoying to think that you can enjoy certain compositions only through these very intricate, big sound systems, which I cannot afford. And I did want to say about, since you said this thing, Jamie, about Steven Wilson and his new album, I like the new album, but it's true that he does kind of like stitch various parts together. I think it flows nicely, but you can tell when it's a new patch, sort of. And what's funny is that Steven Wilson has his podcast called The Album Years, and he has said quite defiantly that he doesn't like Supper's Ready by Genesis, which is like, you know, holy grail of prog epics. Most of us big prog heads love it. He has like accused Genesis of that for that song, saying that, you know, it's all stitched together. And if you compare that to Yes, Close to the Edge, this is the only like nearly 20-minute prog epic where everything is like perfect, seamless, right? You don't see the seams, and that's funny because he's actually done exactly that on the overview.
There's that
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's about like stitching stuff together, but it works on I'm going to totally butcher on cans. Tago Mago, I think it's called Halloran. That 7 minute, that is like the drumming. That drummer's insane. He's one of my favorite drummers. I forget his name, but that works, and that's all stitched together. It seems seamless.
You know, another thing people will do to cheat when they run out of songwriting ideas, metal bands, they'll go, well, our songs aren't as good as they used to be, but people like heavy shit, so we'll just play it heavier.
Yeah.
People go, well, it's heavy. Yeah, but those aren't classic songs.
Yeah, that's one reason why I'm not, as I get older, I become less and less fond of an album like Painkiller by Judas Priest, because I find that they took their composition style from those classic 70s albums, and they just made it so heavy, so loud, so overmastered. It kind of lost a bit of its charm, their signature kind of style of composing.
It's not in my top 10 favorites.
You know, Philip, that's a good point, because mastering has a lot to do with it as well. Because if it's not an enjoyable experience, if it's too brick-walled and it hurts your ears and you get fatigue, that's not helping the songs out either.
Yeah.
And of course, we're all in that era now where everything's brick-walled, but I think maybe things are calming down, but I don't.
Yeah, what's his name who produces all the big metal bands now?
Andy Sneap?
Yeah. There are great songs on albums that he's produced, but by song 5, I got ear fatigue from his production.
Yeah.
Just too something, too perfect, too upfront, too something.
Would you say it's corporate or not?
It is very corporate, yeah. I feel like he's given people what he thinks they want instead of just doing something cool and different.
Well, didn't they call it loudness wars in the late 90s, early 2000s?
It started like in the later 90s.
Yeah, where everything had to be mastered at this insane volume.
Yeah, and there's no dynamic range. It's just flat. You look at like the, wavelength of it. It's just flat. There's no dynamic range. That's why I like a lot of the 80s CDs. Now, this is a different topic. A lot of people bitch about the 80s CDs, but they're not futzed with. A lot of them are flat transfers. You can go and add EQ. All you have to do is boost up the volume if you want them louder. But it's just funny how the perception changes.
Well, it's like your car stereo now is all bass, because I had to adjust when I got my car. Everything's so bassy. I was going to say about production too. We should also, 80s had bad production, but I can think of the songs are great, but MC5's Back in the USA, that is absolutely the worst production I've ever heard. The drums sound like they're played on rice paper.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but the tunes are great, but it's just, I can't listen to it because the production's just it's flat.
See, I can listen to it because there's something iconic about it. It's the energy. You can feel the room. But it's all how you look at it, though. Everybody hears this stuff differently, though.
Yeah, exactly. I like High Time over that myself, personally.
Yeah. But it would be interesting if we had on the panel now someone who's like a big black metal fan, like the stuff in the late 80s, early 90s, because the whole point of that was like the composition and the production have to be as primitive as possible. And what people would consider, and I'm not a fan at all, but I know that what fans would consider good would be something that sounds primitive, like recorded on I forget.
Bostack's 4-track from 1986?
Probably that, yeah. In someone's garage or someone's bedroom, and that's like what they celebrate. Like these bands like Mayhem, Borzum, whatever, like they just like it when it sounds rough and just disgusting. But that's the whole point.
I've seen some pretty heavy bands in my day, and things close to like grindcore, and it just sounds so chaotic to me that I'm like, how do you go about writing this? And then after you write it, how do you memorize it? Because it just sounds like chaos. It's like you can memorize a dance routine or a ballet, and you can all do it over and over every night, but get a mob to storm something and then try to get everyone to do exactly the same movement they did again in that mob movement. They can't. That's how that song feels to me.
Well, it's like saying Trout Mask Replica. You know that record?
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like
they
chaos.
practiced 8 months to do that, and they went in the studio with Zappa, recorded in 6 hours. They were so well rehearsed.
Mm.
But that
Jamie,
album's nuts.
How do Napalm Death remember and go about composing or recording a tune like You Suffer? It's like literally 3 seconds.
Don't all their tunes just say Napalm Death in them anyway? Every tune I've heard just says Napalm Death, I think.
That's it. That's all there
You
is.
just want to call bullshit on some songs.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm calling bullshit on that.
Well, I think how do those guys, because they down tune big time, right? I mean, that's the other thing.
Well, yeah.
Like, how do you
Does Alexander have anything to say? He hasn't said a damn word.
Oh.
I feel like we're talking over him, not giving him a chance.
Alex, sorry, we're just rapping. Jump in. Please jump in.
Yeah. I could add something what Jamie said earlier about structure in a composition. I think that's an important and interesting part, and about stitching stuff together. Sometimes it works, and I have two prime examples. Like, it's not really progressive stuff, but it's 4 parts stuff together, and it works. And it's the Beatles with "Happiness Is a Warm Gun." No, it's 3 songs, I think, not 4. And also "Paranoid Android" by Radiohead.
Yeah.
Both are masterpieces, in my opinion. Both songs. And
Well, I think
weird structure, but in some cases it works.
I think that whole I think OK Computer is just an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would have to be my favorite album of the 90s. What was that, 97?
Yes.
Perfect Record. That was their peak as far as I'm concerned. Some people like, A and stuff like that, but I think OK Computer was just...
Yeah,
I
totally agree. Yeah.
They started to lose you where?
When their music started to go off the plexiglass for me.
Now they're just totally avant-garde. So
yeah.
I was going to say something that's stitched together. One of my favorite albums is Forever Changes by Love. And the last song, You Set the Scene. They're 2 tunes, but they work together well. And it's another one where the music's kind of happy, but if you really listen to the lyrics, it's a little bit dark, which that album gets pigeonholed as psychedelic, but it's most of the messages on that song and that album, it's dark.
I think it's more than it gets pigeonholed as that whole psychedelic thing, but I think there's a lot more to that album than just the psychedelia. Of course, the songwriting, the production, it
sounds great too.
It's a great record. Yeah, 100%.
With Radiohead, what's really cool is that, when you mention Paranoid Android, that's like composing with this mindset of let's be unpredictable and let's create many different moods and let's just throw many curveballs, but it really works. I think it's really cool to compose in a way that's unpredictable, right? Not just out of the ordinary, but very, very unpredictable, moody as well. If I may bring a different example, my favorite example of a composition that's like an album of many different songs, but where it feels like it's just one entire song, where everything perfectly flows into the next song. The sequencing is perfect in that respect, where really it feels like you're not listening to separate songs, but one complete song. And it's kind of in that realm of prog is this album here. I think it's my favorite example of that kind of thing. Marillion with Misplaced Childhood. This is what I really admire about composition here, that really they have a certain style and mood and textures, but it really feels like you're listening to one song that just, you're kind of flying on this magic carpet and you don't feel the changes, the bumps or anything. It's just kind of flowing perfectly. And by the time this thing is over, you're like, what did I just listen to? You don't distinguish between one song or another. I think that's the magic of this kind of composing. I don't know if there are other examples of a complete album of different songs, but it all feels like one song.
Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Dark Side of the Moon. There you go.
That's the perfect example.
What about Thick as a Brick? Does that feel like one complete song?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the Steven Wilson thing, right? It's 2 20-minute songs, but yeah.
Don't you have that Sleep album, Jerusalem? What's the one where it's one song?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like 54 minutes of just constant like droning, and then at some point it gets a bit heavier and faster, and then more droning.
Exactly. Got to make sure you have a lot of pod on hand to listen to that one.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. Anybody else got anything? I don't have anything more to add. I've already spouted off enough.
No, I feel like
Alex, you got anything? Jamie?
Nope.
I was still thinking of like just one last thing.
We got time, Philip. Go ahead.
Which is like not just unpredictable composition, but like these like singular composers throughout history, like let's say Frank Zappa, who could throw into a cauldron like things that normally don't go together, but in the end it really works, and that becomes their signature style of composing. Like you hear Zappa and you think, okay, kind of rock bluesy, poppy. Oh, he has a lot of humor in there as well. And then suddenly there's like atonal jazz. How the hell can that actually work? But it does work, right? And one of my favorite examples of this kind of idea came a few years ago with an album that totally blew my mind, changed my world, rocked my world, everything. And it's not supposed to work, but it does work. It's this one here by Devin Townsend, Empath. I absolutely adore this album. In this, you have songs where he literally combines together grindcore, Disney music, disco, reggae, and Frank Zappa. And it's not supposed to work, and it does. It's crazy, like how he goes from like playing literally the most insane, groovy, brutal death metal, and then suddenly disco, and it works.
Can I just say real fast before we go?
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Grant. You're on mute or something. Well, I assume Grant says go ahead and speak, Laszlo. Okay, so I listen to a lot of new rock, and a lot of these bands that I find, they have a grungy feel to them. Some of them could have come out in the 90s, some could have came out in the 70s. And I listen to the songs they play, and man, they get the sound down of sometimes like 70s, early 70s proto metal, or 90s grungy stuff like Alice in Chains or something. They get the sound down perfectly. They get a good riff. They get good verses, and they get a decent melody here and there. They never, well, not never. So many don't have memorable choruses. They don't have that part that you wait for and you sing along with. And every once in a while, I'll come across a band that does, and I said, thank you. I don't know if they're not doing it on purpose or they just don't have the talent to do it. I don't know. So it's something that's missing in modern day hard rock songwriting.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my software locked up. That's all right, but I'm back. So.
All right. I thought I was going to have to take it out.
You're gonna have to take over.
Yeah.
All right, so we should probably wrap this dog up. Anybody else have anything to add before we? It's just a good discussion. We do want to hear from you in the chat down below. How does composition play into these albums and this music? How does production sequencing? I mean, this conversation's kind of evolved, but we do want to hear from you in the chat. So does anybody else have anything before we wrap it up?
I think we could definitely do at some point a panel on like what Jamie just said, like our favorite choruses.
We could do that.
Either catchy or whatever else a chorus can be.
God, that'd be a great show.
Mm-hmm.
Bring that down. Yeah, definitely 100%. Anyway.
Yeah.
Hey, if you'd like to be on these panels, we'd love to have you. We have a Patreon where we throw up the shows a day before. There's conversations over there. You can hang out over there. And it's a minimal amount, and it helps support the channel. We also have a Ko-fi. Buy us a pint or a cup of coffee. Would appreciate that. take donations. We're just here talking music, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully we're turning you on to stuff, but we do want to hear about your comments down below about composition, production, and all that. So, all right. I don't know when this is going to air, but we'll get it up pretty soon. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming on. It's always fun to talk music with these guys. Philip, Alex, he handled the show perfectly. The hazing went well. And Jamie and Steve Polari. All right, everybody, we'll see you, and keep it clean.
Take care.
See ya.